Okay, let's unpack this. The Middle East feels incredibly tense right now, and the sources you've shared, well, they put the UAE in a really interesting, maybe precarious position between Iran and Israel.
Hmm.
So this deep dive, it's all about exploring why the UAE might get drawn into this, based only on the material you sent over.
Exactly. We're sticking just to what's in these documents.
And recent Israeli actions, they've definitely put everyone on edge. But your sources, they keep pointing back to the UAE's relationship with Israel, since the Abraham Accords. That seems key here.
It absolutely is. When you look at the material, there's a strong focus on why the UAE might be seen as vulnerable, those Abraham Accords, the normalization deals.
Yeah.
Well, from the perspective of some in Iran's leadership,
Mm.
according to these sources, that closeness isn't neutrality. It's seen as, well, collaboration.
Collaboration, okay. So that automatically puts them in a different category.
Potentially, yes.
Hmm.
Sources suggest this viewpoint could make the UAE a target.
And the material really hits on the practical reasons, too, like strategic proximity. They're right there.
Geographically close.
And despite all the modern infrastructure, the sources kind of describe their independent defense capability as, well, limited against certain threats, without major U.S. help.
Right. Those gleaming towers in Dubai, the financial hub status, the big oil ports, the sources frame these as highly visible, maybe vulnerable assets.
And there's a symbolic aspect, too, isn't there? The sources argue hitting the UAE sends a message
A powerful
without
narrative.
maybe crossing that huge red line of attacking Israel directly.
Precisely. And it connects back, as your material points out, to past warnings.
Mm.
Iran has apparently signaled before that Arab states normalizing with Israel might face consequences in future conflicts.
So the question raised by the sources is, was that just talk or something more?
A quiet promise, perhaps, that could become relevant now. That's the implication.
Okay, so if Iran did decide to retaliate, maybe not directly at Israel, but at its allies, how might that look according to these specific sources? This is where it gets kind of chilling.
Well, the material leans heavily towards the idea of proxy attacks.
Oh, okay. Not necessarily Iranian flags on the missiles.
Exactly. It points specifically to groups like the Houthis in Yemen,
Mm-mm.
Iran-backed, and crucially, they have already targeted the UAE.
Right, those attacks on Abu Dhabi back in 2022, the sources mention that.
They do. It's presented as a key precedent. So the material sketches out possibilities. Maybe a Houthi drone hitting somewhere high profile, like Dubai Marina,
Wow.
or major cyber attacks hitting the banking sector, disrupting oil tankers again in the Strait of Hormuz, things like that.
And the analysis suggests that Iran could orchestrate this without actually, putting their name on it.
That's the idea presented. Plausible deniability, perhaps, but the message gets through loud and clear.
But, okay, the sources don't just argue one way. They also look at why Iran might not attack the UAE, right?
Yes, and this is crucial. The material brings up the serious economic consequences for Iran itself.
How so?
Attacking a major economic hub like the UAE, one that's, implicitly backed by the U.S., it could be devastating for Iran's economy, which is already under immense pressure from sanctions. It could risk, well, collapse.
And presumably it would tick off a lot of other countries, too.
Absolutely. According to the sources, it would likely lead to greater international isolation. It could push moderate Arab states further away, maybe even solidify a regional bloc against Iran.
Makes sense.
Plus, there's the internal situation in Iran. The material mentions potential domestic pressure. A reckless war could easily backfire on the leadership at home.
So the sources suggest maybe Iran plays a long game instead, like indirect revenge, cyber stuff, psychological warfare.
That's definitely one line of reasoning presented. Strategic patience, perhaps, rather than immediate, risky escalation against the UAE.
Okay, now things get even more complex. The sources you shared, they raise some, let's say, provocative theories.
They certainly explore some edgy possibilities.
Like the idea that maybe the recent Israeli strike wasn't just retaliation, but was actually designed to provoke a certain kind of response from Iran or its allies.
That possibility is floated in the material, yes.
Mhm.
The idea of a calculated move aimed at escalation, potentially drawing others deeper into the conflict. It's an uncomfortable thought.
And then there's what the sources call a conspiracy angle. The idea that maybe the U.S. might see some advantage if Iran did lash out. Like it could justify more U.S. involvement.
That theory is mentioned, along with what's termed a wild theory,
Which is?
that the UAE could, in a sense, be viewed by some as expendable, sacrificed maybe to justify broader American or Israeli action against Iran. Especially, the sources note, in a U.S. election year.
Okay, just to be really clear, these are theories presented in the source material we're discussing, not our analysis, but what the documents raise.
Absolutely, just reporting what the sources contain. But they do add layers of complexity.
Mhm.
And tying it back to the UAE's reality, the sources hammer home its economic vulnerability. Stability is everything for Dubai's image as a global hub.
Any attack would shake that confidence badly.
Severely. And the material notes the UAE's tricky balancing act, trying to maintain significant trade ties with Iran, even amidst all this tension.
Plus the domestic side, right, that huge expat population. A conflict could cause real internal stability issues.
It could. And the sources also critique the Gulf security setup, basically saying the UAE can't fully defend itself alone against sophisticated threats like ballistic missiles or complex asymmetric attacks.
Which, the sources suggest, might make Saudi Arabia's recent moves towards détente with Iran look, well,
Potentially prescient is a word used in the material, a different approach compared to the UAE's via the Abraham Accords in this volatile context.
so, wrapping this up based purely on the sources, it
Yeah.
looks like the UAE is walking a real tightrope, an ally of Israel now, but geographically and economically exposed to Iran.
That's the core tension highlighted in the material. Gaining security through one alliance seems to have created new kinds of exposure.
Exactly. And the sources, they really leave us and you with some tough questions. Based on all this, will Iran actually dare to strike the UAE directly or through proxies?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question raised.
And looking back, Iran was signing the Abraham Accords a strategic misstep for the UAE. Did it inadvertently paint a target on its back instead of just boosting security? What really stands out to you after hearing this analysis of the source material? Do you think Iran will attack the UAE? Let us know your take.